tail light from inside the vehicle immediately. This creates a time-stamped record that cannot be disputed. You've documented the exact moment contact was made and confirmed your vehicle's condition before that contact happened. You are not being confrontational. You are not refusing any lawful order. You are simply creating evidence to protect yourself. This is exactly what defense attorneys advise their clients to do. When a driver documents the taillight contact in real time, it removes the officer's exclusive control over the narrative, not dealing with a confused or uninformed person. They are dealing with someone who understands the process. And an informed citizen is far more difficult to build a case against. Your legal protection for recording comes from the First Circuit's ruling in Glick v. Kniff. The court confirmed that citizens have a clearly established First Amendment right to record police officers while they are performing their official duties in public. Traffic stops are public interactions. You are in a public or semi-public space. The officer is carrying out official duties. You have every legal right to document what is happening to your property. Pennsylvania v. Mims established that you must exit your vehicle if ordered to do so, but nothing in that ruling prevents you from documenting activity involving your vehicle. These rulings work together. You follow lawful commands while simultaneously protecting yourself by creating evidence. Both are possible at the same time. Have you ever had an officer tap your taillight during a stop and wondered what they were actually doing? Leave a comment below. Most people don't even notice it until someone points it out. Now let's move to the second tactic. This one prevents the most common trap that leads to extended stops and illegal searches. After the officer touches your taillight and approaches your window, the conversation begins. They're going to ask what seem like casual questions. Where are you headed tonight? Where are you coming from? Do you know why I pulled you over? Have you had anything to drink? These questions sound like friendly conversation. They are not. In law enforcement training, this technique is called interdiction. These are investigative questions specifically designed to give the officer legal justification to expand the scope of the stop. Every answer you provide can be used to establish reasonable suspicion for additional investigation. Most drivers believe that being polite means answering every question they're asked. That is a costly mistake. Being respectful and cooperative does not mean surrendering your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. You can be courteous and still protect yourself legally. Here is the exact response that ends the questioning immediately. The officer asks where you're coming from. You look at them calmly and say these 7 words. I am not answering any questions. Then immediately follow with this. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact words. Memorize them. You don't say them with attitude or aggression. You say them clearly, calmly, and then you stop talking. That last part is absolutely critical. Silence is your most powerful legal tool in this moment. Officers are trained to fill silence with more questions. Most people are socially conditioned to fill silence with answers. You need to break that habit right now. You ask your question. Then you wait. You don't elaborate, you don't explain yourself, you don't apologize. You simply wait for a response. Here's what typically follows. The officer tells you that you are being detained for the traffic violation. That is legal. They are permitted to detain you for the reasonable time it takes to issue a citation. At that point, you say this. I understand. I am not answering any questions without my attorney present. Calm and clear. No emotion. You are wrong approach. Officer asks where you're headed. You explain that you're just heading home after watching the game at a friend's place across town. Now the officer asks how long you were there, whether you had anything to drink, whose house it was, what's the address. You've opened the door to a dozen follow-up questions. Each answer produces more information. Eventually, the officer is asking to search your vehicle because you mentioned being at someone else's home, and now they're wondering whether you picked something up there. The right approach. Officer asks where you're headed. You say, I am not answering questions. Am I being detained, or am I free to leave? The officer recognizes that you understand your rights. They stop pushing. They return to their patrol car, run your information, write the citation or issue a warning, hand it to you, and you leave. Total stop time, around 8 minutes. No extended investigation, no search, no fishing for additional violations. The legal foundation here comes from 3 major Supreme Court decisions. Miranda v. Arizona established your right to remain silent during custodial interrogation. Berkemer v. McCarty clarified that while routine traffic stops are not technically custodial interrogation under Miranda, you still retain the right to decline answering questions. Together, these cases establish a clear principle. You are never required to answer investigative questions during a traffic stop. You are only required to provide your license, registration, and proof of insurance. Everything beyond that is voluntary, and you should decline. Now let's talk about the third tactic. This is the one that prevents illegal searches more than anything else, and it's the moment where most innocent people accidentally give up their constitutional rights. At some point during the stop, the officer may say something like, "Do you mind if I take a quick look inside your vehicle?" Or, "Can I search your car real quick? I just want to make sure everything's fine." This is a test. Here's what most drivers don't understand. If the officer had legal justification to search your vehicle without your permission, they would not be asking. The fact that they're asking means they need your consent. They do not have probable cause. They do not have reasonable suspicion strong enough to hold up in court. They need you to say yes. And most drivers do say yes because they believe that refusing makes them appear guilty. This is called authority compliance. It's a psychological pattern where people automatically defer to anyone in a position of authority. The officer is framing the search request as a character test. Saying no implies you have something to hide. Saying yes implies you're an honest person with nothing to worry about. But the legal reality is this. When an officer asks for permission to search, what they're actually communicating is that they have no evidence, no probable cause, and nothing that would satisfy a judge. They are asking you to voluntarily give up your constitutional rights so they can try to find something. Here is exactly what you say. The officer asks if they can search your vehicle. You look directly at them and say these 5 words. "I do not consent to searches." Say it clearly. Don't add qualifications. Don't apologize. Don't say you have nothing to hide but still refuse. That kind of statement undermines your position. Just say the line, then stop talking. Do not fill the silence. Let them process what you've said. This is entirely legal, and every experienced defense attorney will tell you it is your strongest protection in this moment. Here's why it works. Consent searches are the simplest way for police to gather evidence. If you agree to the search, anything discovered is fully admissible in court, no exceptions. If you refuse and they search anyway without proper legal justification, anything found can be challenged. Your attorney files a motion to suppress. The prosecution must then prove the search was lawful. If they cannot meet that burden, the evidence gets excluded. Without evidence, the case falls apart. The wrong approach. Officer asks to search. You say, "Sure, I don't have anything illegal, so go ahead." The officer searches and finds an old prescription bottle with a few pills inside. The prescription is your spouse's, left in the car from last week. You are arrested for possession of a controlled substance. You try to explain in court that you consented because you genuinely had nothing to worry about. The judge's response is simple. Consent is consent. You are convicted. A drug charge now sits permanently on your record. The right approach. Officer asks to search. You say, "I do not consent to any searches." The officer may still search if they genuinely believe they have probable cause, but your attorney now files a motion to suppress. The prosecution must identify specific, concrete facts that gave the officer probable cause. If they cannot, everything discovered during that search is inadmissible. Case dismissed. No conviction, no record. The legal backing here is solid. United States v. Drayton confirmed that officers may request consent to search, but the Supreme Court also made clear that every person has the right to refuse, and that refusal alone cannot be treated as evidence of guilt. Florida v. Bostic reinforced that declining a search request is constitutionally protected behavior. Now let's cover the fourth and final tactic. This one is about handling the pushback that often follows a refusal. Some officers will try to pressure you after you decline. They'll say things like, "If you've got nothing to hide, why won't you let me look?" This is a psychological tactic designed to make you doubt your own decision. They want you to feel that refusing makes you look suspicious. Most people cave right here. Don't. Here is what you say. "Officer, I am exercising my constitutional rights. I do not consent." That is your complete response. You are not arguing. You are not justifying yourself. You are not explaining your reasoning. You are simply restating your position calmly and clearly. Another form of pressure is the canine threat. The officer says they'll call a drug detection dog and that you'll be waiting a while. Your response is silence. Let them make that call if they choose to. Here's what they're not telling you. Rodriguez v. United States ruled that police cannot extend a traffic stop beyond the time needed to complete the original purpose just to wait for a canine unit. If they already have reasonable suspicion of drug activity, The dog is coming regardless of your consent. If they don't have reasonable suspicion, they can only hold you for as long as it takes to finish writing your ticket. If the dog doesn't arrive before that process is complete, they are required to let you go. Your refusal to consent changes none of that math. This is where you use the same key question again. If the officer tells you to wait for the dog, you ask, "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" If they say you're detained, you respond, "On what legal grounds are you extending this stop? My documents have been returned and the purpose of the stop has been completed." You are now creating a record that will give any attorney the foundation they need to challenge whatever follows. Stay calm. Repeat your position. "I do not consent to searches." Then remain silent. Now let's put all 4 tactics together in a single real-world scenario so you can see exactly how this works from beginning to end. You're driving home at 10 in the evening. Lights appear behind you. You pull over safely, turn off the engine, switch on your interior light, and place your hands on the wheel. The officer approaches from the rear. You hear a tap on your taillight. You immediately pick up your phone and say clearly, "Officer made physical contact with my rear taillight at 10:03 p.m. on March 20th. My taillight was fully functional and undamaged before this stop." The officer hears you documenting. They now understand they are dealing with someone who is paying attention and creating a record. The officer reaches your window and asks for your license and registration. You hand both over without any issue. No attitude, just compliance. Then the officer asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" You respond calmly, "I am not answering any questions." "Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" The officer says you are being detained for speeding, clocked at 52 in a 40 zone. You reply, "I understand. I am not answering any questions without my attorney present." The officer asks where you're coming from. You say nothing. They ask again. You repeat, "I am not answering questions." The officer, recognizing that you understand your rights, returns to their vehicle to run your information. They come back with a ticket and then ask, "Do you mind if I take a quick look in your car?" You say clearly and without hesitation, "I do not consent to any searches." The officer responds, "Why not? Are you hiding something?" You say, "Officer, I am exercising my constitutional rights. I do not consent." The officer holds eye contact for a moment. They are determining whether they have probable cause to proceed without your permission. They don't. They hand you the ticket, ask for your signature, and tell you that you're free to go. You drive away. No search, no arrest, no evidence collected against you. Every stage of the stop handled correctly. Total time, roughly 8 minutes. Now compare that to what most drivers do. They don't document the taillight contact. They answer every question freely. "Where are you coming from?" "My friend's place." "What were you doing there?" "Just hanging out." "How much did you have to drink?" "A couple of beers." Now the officer has reasonable suspicion for a DUI investigation. They ask to search. The driver agrees because refusing feels suspicious. The officer finds something minor, an empty can in the back seat, a pocket knife that technically exceeds the local length ordinance. Now there are charges. There are attorney fees. There are court dates, fines, and points on a license. All because the driver didn't understand that a traffic stop is not a casual conversation. It is a structured encounter where every word you say contributes to a case being built against you. The Supreme Court cases that support everything covered here are as follows. Terry v. Ohio established that officers need reasonable suspicion to detain you and probable cause to conduct a search. Pennsylvania v. Mims confirmed you must comply with an order to exit your vehicle, but that compliance does not eliminate your other constitutional protections. Schneckloth v. Bustamante ruled that consent to search is only valid if it is given freely and voluntarily. If you are confused, frightened, or pressured into agreeing, that consent may not be legally sound. Rodriguez v. United States held that police cannot extend a stop beyond its original purpose without developing independent, reasonable suspicion. These cases protect you, but only if you actually invoke the rights they guarantee. Here is a quick recap of the 4 tactics. First, document the taillight contact immediately. Pull out your phone and narrate out loud what just happened and when. Create a time-stamped record that removes the officer's exclusive control over the story. Second, refuse to answer investigative questions. Say clearly, "I am not answering any questions. Am I being detained or am I free to leave?" Then invoke your right to silence and request an attorney before any further conversation. Third, never consent to a search. Say firmly and clearly, I do not consent to any searches. Repeat it if they push. Your refusal is constitutionally protected and cannot on its own be used as evidence of wrongdoing. Fourth, stay calm and silent after invoking your rights. Anything said after that point can still be used against you. Your silence is not suspicious. It is smart. These 4 tactics have helped countless drivers avoid illegal searches, unfounded charges, and outcomes that never should have happened. The reality is straightforward. Officers are doing their jobs. They are trained to investigate, to gather information, and to ask questions in ways that lead people to voluntarily give up rights they didn't realize they were surrendering. That is not illegal. That is simply how the process works. But you have legal counter-moves available to you, and now you know exactly what they are. The drivers who use these tactics leave the stop with their rights intact. The drivers who don't end up fighting charges in a courtroom that never should have existed in the first place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video where we cover exactly what to say when an officer claims they detect the smell of marijuana coming from your vehicle. That single claim leads to more arrests than almost any other tactic, and the correct response is something the vast majority of drivers have never been taught. If this information was useful, hit the like button and drop a comment telling me which tactic surprised you the most, or share whether you've ever experienced an officer tapping your taillight during a stop. Stay informed, stay protected. 11:30 p.m. You're driving home from a long day. You've done nothing wrong. Maybe you were going 3 miles over the limit, or maybe a bulb in your license plate light just flickered out. The siren chirps behind you. You pull over. You're a law-abiding citizen. You have your concealed carry permit in your wallet and your sidearm securely holstered in your center console. You take a breath. You remind yourself you have nothing to hide. The officer walks up. He's professional, but he's alert. That high-intensity flashlight cuts through your window, scanning your hands, your lap, your passenger seat. And then he asks the question. The one question that is going to determine whether you drive home tonight or whether you spend the next 2 years and $15,000 untangling a legal nightmare. Do you have any weapons in the vehicle? Your heart rate spikes. Your brain is screaming one thing. Be honest. Show him I'm one of the good guys. But I'm here to tell you right now, as a criminal defense attorney who has sat across the table from hundreds of good guys who ended up in handcuffs, that instinct, that urge to explain yourself, that need to over-cooperate, that is the single most dangerous thing in the car with you right now. More dangerous than the firearm itself. Today I'm going to give you 5 words, 5 specific legally armored words that will protect your freedom, your record, and your right to ever own a firearm again. But I'm not just going to hand them to you and walk away, because if you say them the wrong way, or in the wrong state, or at the wrong moment, you could actually make your situation worse. I'm going to break down the psychological traps officers are trained to use, the legal framework that most gun owners have never heard of, and I'm going to tell you the true story of a retired firefighter named Mark, who did everything right and still spent $15,000 in 3 months of his life paying for one sentence he never needed to say. Before we go any further, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to share is the same advice I charge $400 an hour to give in my office. You're getting it in the next few minutes for free. The laws around your Second Amendment rights are shifting faster than most people realize. If you're not informed, you are a target. Click subscribe, then keep watching. Now let me show you exactly how this goes wrong. And I want you to watch yourself in this story, because I promise you, this is you. You're driving home. Your legally registered firearm is in the center console. Your concealed carry permit is current. You are doing everything right. You get pulled over for a busted taillight. The officer walks up, flashlight in your face, and he asks it. And here's what your brain does. It panics. It thinks, if I say yes, does he assume I'm dangerous? If I say no, and he finds it, did I just commit a crime? So you try to do the reasonable thing. You try to explain. You say, yes, officer, I have a handgun in my center console. I have a valid permit. It's registered. I was at the range earlier. I just want to get home. Sounds cooperative, right? Sounds like the responsible, stand-up thing to do. You just made 5 separate legal mistakes in a single breath. And your attorney, if you ever needed one, would put their head in their hands the moment you finish that sentence. Here's why. Every word you added after yes is a statement. Every statement is evidence. And evidence can be twisted, misremembered, misquest, and used against you in ways you never anticipated. You said the gun is in the console. The officer writes in his report, It was within immediate reach. You said you were at the range. The officer notes you had recent firearm activity. You said the gun is registered. But what if your permit lapsed last month and you forgot? You have now admitted to carrying without a valid permit. In some states, that is a felony. You thought you were being cooperative. You were actually being your own worst witness. And here's something I need you to understand about the legal framework behind that question, because this is the part that changes everything. When an officer asks if you have weapons in the vehicle, they are not making casual conversation. They are initiating what is legally called a Terry investigation, named after the landmark 1968 Supreme Court case, Terry versus Ohio. Under that ruling, if an officer develops reasonable suspicion that you are armed and dangerous, those are the two operative words, armed and dangerous together, they can initiate a pat-down search. Now here's the critical piece that almost nobody knows. Being legally armed does not make you dangerous. Read that again. Having a firearm legally owned and legally carried does not by itself satisfy the dangerous requirement under Terry. Armed and dangerous are two separate legal elements. Both must be present. But the moment you open your mouth and start explaining your gun, your carry habits, your route home, your reasons for having it loaded, your destination, you are handing the officer a narrative. And that narrative gets to define what dangerous means in the police report. You gave them the armed part yourself, and then you helped them build the dangerous part with your own words out of your own mouth. There's more. In 2026, the legal landscape around these stops has become a patchwork of confusion that even experienced gun owners are getting wrong. The Supreme Court's ruling in Barnes v. Felix changed how courts evaluate these encounters. The ruling held that reasonableness in a use of force or investigative stop is determined by the totality of the circumstances. What does that mean for you? It means every word you say, every nervous explanation, every well-intentioned detail you volunteer becomes part of that totality. If you say, I have a gun, but it's for protection, a prosecutor in a restrictive jurisdiction can argue you were expecting trouble. Your own words become a narrative of aggression that you handed them for free. I see it constantly. A client tries to be helpful. They say, Officer, I just want you to know the magazine is out, so it's completely safe. Well, in certain jurisdictions, if there is a round in the chamber, the weapon is still considered loaded by statute. If you said it was safe and you were legally wrong, now you're not just a gun owner at a traffic stop. Now you're a liar in a police report. And once you're a liar in a police report, you have lost the jury before the trial even starts. Now, before I give you the 5 words, I need to tell you about Mark. Mark was a client of mine, retired firefighter, 25 years of service, clean record, responsible CCW holder. He was driving through a state that as of this year still does not have a duty to inform law. He got pulled over for a simple lane change violation. The officer, doing his job, asked the question, do you have any weapons? Mark, being a good guy, wanted to be transparent. He said, yes, officer, I have my Smith & Wesson under the seat. I have a permit. The officer's demeanor changed instantly. He ordered Mark out of the car. Now Mark is 62 years old. He moves a little slowly. The officer interpreted that slowness as reaching. Mark was tackled, handcuffed, and his car was searched from front to back. During that search, the officer found a box of ammunition in the trunk that was unsecured according to a very specific local municipal ordinance that Mark had never heard of. Because Mark had openly admitted to having the firearm, the officer now had the justification to expand the search to the totality of Mark's firearm setup. Mark spent $15,000 in legal fees to fight a misdemeanor charge that only existed because he opened his mouth. If Mark had known what I'm about to teach you, the officer would have had no legal basis to search that trunk over a lane change violation. Mark would have had a $100 ticket and been home for dinner. Instead, he had a mugshot and 3 months of legal hell. He did nothing illegal. He talked his way into a nightmare. So, here they are, the 5 words. When a police officer looks you in the eye and asks, do you have any weapons in the vehicle? Here's exactly what you say. I don't answer any questions. That's it. 5 words. Calm, respectful, legal, and in a courtroom bulletproof. Not aggressive, not confrontational, not delivered with attitude or defiance. You are saying these words the way you would politely decline dessert at a restaurant. Neutral tone, steady eye contact, both hands visible on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Let me explain exactly why these 5 words are the strongest legal position you can take in that moment. First, you are not lying. This is enormous. If you say no when you have a firearm, you have potentially committed a crime. If you say yes and start explaining, you've opened a door you can never close. But I don't answer any questions is simply true. You're not claiming to have no weapons. You are not claiming anything at all. You are exercising a constitutional right that the Supreme Court has upheld repeatedly, the right to remain silent. And critically, in the 2013 Salinas versus Texas ruling, the court made clear that you must expressly invoke that right. By saying these 5 words, you have done exactly that. You have put a legal wall between your mouth and a prosecutor's evidence file. Second, you are not being uncooperative, and this distinction matters enormously. There is a legal difference the size of a canyon between refusing a lawful order and declining to answer a question. Answering questions is not a lawful order. It is a request. You are not required to fulfill it. Handing over your license and registration when asked, that is a lawful order. You comply immediately and without argument. Following instructions to step out of the vehicle. Lawful order. You comply. Answering questions about what you have in your car. That is a conversation, and you have every right to decline it politely, calmly, and completely. Third, you are preserving your legal position for everything that comes after this stop. If anything escalates, if the officer misdemeans, if you end up in a courtroom over something you never anticipated, your attorney is working with a clean slate. No miscut statements, no out-of-context explanations, no narrative you accidentally handed to the prosecution at the side of a road at midnight. You said 5 words. That is the entire record. And in a criminal case, that blank slate is worth more than you know. Cases are not won on what actually happened. They are won and lost on what was said. Now, let's talk about the moment after you say it, because I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, that sounds great in theory, but what happens in the real world when I say that to a real officer on a real road? Fair question. Here's how it plays out. The officer will most likely respond one of 3 ways. The first is, "Sir, I'm just trying to make sure we're both safe here. This is a reasonable statement, and you acknowledge it as such." Your response, "I understand, officer. I don't answer any questions. Hands stay on the wheel. Voice stays even." You are not challenging him. You are not escalating anything. You are holding your position with complete calm. The second response is, "Are you refusing to cooperate?" This is a psychological pressure tactic specifically designed to make you feel like you're doing something wrong, so you'll start talking. Your response is precise. "I'm fully cooperating, officer. I'm following your instructions. I just don't answer questions." See the distinction you are drawing? Cooperation means following lawful orders. It means staying in the vehicle, keeping hands visible, providing your identification when asked. It does not mean narrating your life to every question posed to you. You know that distinction now. And when you say it that way, the officer knows that you know it. The third response is the one designed to scare you. If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm going to have to assume the worst. Don't let this move you. This is built purely to trigger your panic reflex. You're providing your response. "I understand your concern, officer. I don't answer any questions." And then you stop talking. Not 5 seconds later. Right then, you stop completely. No nervous filler words, no explaining the silence, no fidgeting. You let the quiet sit there. Most officers will run your license, handle the traffic issue that initiated the stop, and move on. Because most traffic stops are exactly what they appear to be. A routine interaction where the officer is writing a ticket and going to their next call. When you are calm, non-threatening, and clearly understand your rights, most experienced officers respect that and proceed accordingly. Now here's something that most legal advice completely ignores, and it matters just as much as the words themselves. How you hold your body during this stop can make or break the entire encounter. From the moment the officer approaches, your hands are visible on the wheel at 10 and 2, not in your lap, not near the glove box, not reaching for anything. If you need to retrieve your license and registration, you announce it before you move. "My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it slowly with my right hand. Is that all right?" This is not weakness. This is professionalism. You are showing the officer that you are predictable and non-threatening. And that matters more than anything you could say. Your face stays neutral when you deliver those 5 words. No smirking, no eye rolling, no sign like you've been through this before and find it tiresome. You are not performing confidence. You're not proving anything to anyone. You are a calm, legally aware person exercising your rights politely. Your voice does not rise, it does not shake, it does not get louder or sharper. Same volume you'd use asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. Here is something worth internalizing. Most officers make a threat assessment in the first 10 seconds of approaching a vehicle. They are reading your energy before they are reading your words. A driver who is visibly panicking, whose hands are moving, whose voice is climbing in pitch, whose explanations are tumbling out faster than they can be processed, that driver reads as unpredictable. And unpredictable at a traffic stop is the last thing you want to be. Contrast that with a driver who has both hands on the wheel, who makes brief eye contact, who responds in a measured and unhurried way. That driver reads as controlled, someone who knows themselves and knows the situation. The 5 words are most powerful when they come from a person who appears like they have said them before and are entirely comfortable saying them again. The combination of those 5 words delivered in that tone, with hands visible and body completely still, communicates something very specific to an experienced officer. It says, this person has legal awareness. They are not panicking, and they are not a threat. That immediate read, diffuses more situations than any amount of explaining ever could. Now let's talk about the duty to inform states, because this is where good people make an entirely different category of mistake. Some states, Ohio, Texas, Michigan, Louisiana, and roughly a dozen others, legally require you to inform an officer that you are carrying during a police encounter. If you are in one of these states, you must comply with that law. Period. No debate, no invoking the Fifth Amendment as a way around a statutory obligation. That road leads directly to a criminal charge, and I've seen it happen. But here is the critical piece that even people who know about duty to inform laws get completely wrong. The law tells you what to disclose. It does not tell you to answer questions. Those are 2 entirely different things. The disclosure requirement exists. Your right not to answer follow-up questions also exists. Both are true at the same time. This is how you honor both. I call it the 3-step handshake. And if you're in a must-inform state, you need to have this memorized before you ever get behind the wheel again. Step 1 is the document drop. When the officer asks for your identification, hand him your driver's license and your carry permit together without saying a word. This is a non-verbal disclosure. It satisfies the legal requirement without producing a single syllable that can be recorded on a body camera and later mischaracterized in a report. Step 2 is the scripted statement. If the officer's body camera is recording and the state law requires verbal disclosure, you say exactly this and nothing more. Officer, I am required by law to inform you that I have a permit and I am currently armed. Beyond that, I don't answer any questions. Every word of that statement is deliberate. You have satisfied your legal obligation. You have drawn a clean line. You have put the camera on record as a witness to your compliance. Step 3 is the silent follow-through. This is the hardest part for most people because the officer is going to ask follow-up questions. Where is it? Is it loaded? Why are you carrying today? What kind of firearm is it? Your response to every single one of those questions is the same, delivered with a calm expression and a level voice. I don't answer any questions. The law required you to inform them you're armed. The law does not require you to explain your carry position, your ammunition choice, your destination, or your personal philosophy about self-defense. By stopping at the informing part, you have satisfied the state and kept your constitutional shield fully intact. I had a client in a duty to inform state who got this almost right. He did the first part perfectly, handed over his license and CCW permit together, clean and professional. Told the officer he was armed. And then the officer asked, "Where is it?" And my client said, "In my waistband, right hip." Then, "Is it loaded?" "Yes." "Round in the chamber?" "Yes." "Why do you carry with a round in the chamber?" And now my client is standing on the shoulder of a highway at 10 o'clock at night, explaining his personal self-defense philosophy to an officer who is writing every single word down. None of that was required by law. All of it was volunteered. That stop ended with my client's firearm temporarily seized for a safety check. 3 weeks and $2,000 in legal fees to get it back. He did nothing illegal. He just couldn't stop talking after the law told him to stop. Now, let's address what I know is the fear driving most of this. The fear that makes people talk in the first place. You're thinking, what if they search the car anyway? What if they find the gun after I said nothing? Won't that look worse? Won't silence itself be used as evidence of something suspicious? Let me answer that directly because it is one of the most persistent myths I encounter. Silence cannot be used as evidence of guilt once you have expressly invoked your right to remain silent. The moment those 5 words leave your mouth, the legal protection snaps into place. An officer cannot later stand in a courtroom and say, the defendant refused to answer, which I interpreted as consciousness of guilt. Not after you've clearly invoked your rights. That door closes the moment you open your mouth to say those 5 words, and it stays closed. The legal system built that protection deliberately because the alternative, a world where staying silent is itself incriminating, would make the right to remain silent meaningless. Courts have been extremely protective of this principle for decades. No, here's exactly why. If an officer wants to search your vehicle, they need one of 3 things: your consent, probable cause, or a warrant. If they ask, "Can I search your vehicle?" your answer is 5 more words. I do not consent to searches. Say it clearly. Say it so the body camera picks it up. If they have legitimate probable cause, meaning something they legally observe justifies the search, they can proceed without your permission. You do not physically resist. You do not argue. You state clearly, "I do not consent to this search," and then you let them proceed without interfering. You are not surrendering. You are creating a legal record that your attorney can use to challenge the search later if the probable cause didn't exist. And here is the critical truth. If they find a legally owned, legally carried firearm during a search, the outcome of that is determined by facts. Your permit status, state law, how the weapon was stored. Your attorney argues those facts. What makes that argument harder is contradictory statements you made at the side of the road. What makes it easier is silence. Not a word about where the gun was. Not a word about whether it was loaded. The officer found what they found. Your attorney handles what comes next. That is exactly how the system is designed to work. There's one more tool in your arsenal that 99% of drivers forget they have in their pocket: your smartphone. In virtually every jurisdiction in this country, you have a First Amendment right to record police in the discharge of their duties. If you are pulled over, begin recording. You don't need to point it at the officer's face. That is confrontational and counterproductive. Set it on your dashboard or in your cup holder angled to capture the audio of the interaction. Because police reports are written from one perspective: the officer's. If an officer believes you are being difficult, that is what goes into the report. But if your recording shows you a calm, respectful, hands on the wheel, repeatedly saying, "I don't answer any questions," in a quiet and cooperative tone, that recording is your best witness. It doesn't misremember. It can't be intimidated, and it cannot be cross-examined into saying something it didn't capture. I've had cases where an officer claimed a driver admitted to having illegal modifications. We played the phone audio at the preliminary hearing. The driver had said nothing beyond our 5 words. The judge dismissed the charges before we ever reached trial. Your phone is potentially the most powerful legal tool in that car, and it costs you nothing to use it. Let me bring all of this home because this is what I want you carrying with you every single time you get behind the wheel. You are a law-abiding gun owner. You have a right to carry. You have a right to remain silent. Those 2 things do not conflict with each other, not even slightly. You can be completely respectful to law enforcement and still exercise your constitutional rights. You can be cooperative, non-threatening, and professional while still protecting yourself legally. Those things go together. They always have. The legal system was built to accommodate both at the same time, and the people who understand that are the ones who drive home instead of spending the night in a holding cell explaining themselves to someone they've never met. The 5 words, "I don't answer any questions," are not a sign of guilt. They are not an act of defiance. They are not something only criminals say. They are a sign that you understand how the legal system works and that you are operating intelligently within it. Every attorney I know personally would tell their own family to say exactly those words in exactly that situation. Here's the framework to carry with you from this moment forward. In a duty to inform state, hand over your permit with your license without being asked, make the required verbal disclosure if necessary, and then stop talking the instant you've met that legal obligation. In a non-duty to inform state, you have 0 legal obligation to volunteer any information about any firearm. 0. When the question comes, you know exactly what to say. In either state, when the follow-up questions begin, you know what to say. Hands visible, tone respectful, words minimal, body still. That is the formula. That is what keeps you safe, keeps you legal, and keeps your gun rights intact. And one final thing, the most important sentence in this entire video. If a stop ever escalates beyond the traffic encounter, if you are asked to step out, if there is an arrest, if your firearm is seized, if you are transported anywhere, you say nothing further to any law enforcement officer until you have spoken with an attorney. Nothing in the car, nothing at the station, nothing on the walk between the two. Not a defense of yourself, not a clarification, not a single word. You exercised your rights during the stop. You maintain them completely until a lawyer is by your side. You can't unsay what you've already said. But starting right now, you never have to say the wrong thing in the first place. Now there's something coming next that you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Because what happens if the stop escalates further? What if they actually take you to the station and put you in that room with the cold metal table and the two-way mirror? That is an entirely different game with entirely different rules. And if you think the 5 words are powerful at a car window, wait until you see what I have prepared about the interrogation room. There is a 2-word phrase that legally forces law enforcement to stop questioning you immediately, and most people have no idea it exists or exactly how to use it correctly. Subscribe now so that video reaches you the moment it drops, because the knowledge you just received today only works if you have the rest of the picture. The traffic stop is only one piece of a much larger legal encounter that can unfold in ways most people never prepare for. Stay ahead of it. Stay informed. Stay calm. Stay free. Unanimous Supreme Court decision just dropped. 9 justices, 0 disagreement. And if you carry a firearm in your vehicle, what I'm about to tell you changes the rules of every single traffic stop you will ever have for the rest of your life. I am not exaggerating when I say that. Most gun owners have no idea this happened, and the ones who do not know about it right now are the most vulnerable, because police departments across the country are already updating their training based on this ruling. And if you do not know what changed, you could hand an officer a reason to search your car, seize your weapon, and charge you with a crime, even if you did absolutely everything right. Here is what we are going to cover. First, the real case that went to the Supreme Court and what actually happened on that traffic stop. Second, exactly what 9 justices unanimously ruled and what it means the moment you are sitting on the side of the road with blue and red lights in your rearview mirror. Third, the 3 legal landmines that are still very much active even with this ruling in your pocket. And fourth, the 5-step protocol vetted by constitutional attorneys that creates a clean record and turns the Supreme Court decision into your best defense if an officer ever violates your rights. Stay with me until the end, because that last part is the part that actually keeps you out of handcuffs. And before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now. Not after the video, right now. Because the legal landscape for gun owners is shifting faster than at any time in American history. And when the law changes, the government does not send you a memo. They send a patrol car. I do not want your first legal update to happen at 2 in the morning on the shoulder of a highway. Click subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us get into this. Let us talk about the case that started everything, because this ruling did not come out of nowhere. It came from a real situation, a real traffic stop, and a chain of events that should make every law-abiding gun owner pay close attention. The case is Barnes versus Felix, and I want you to understand the facts, because this is not some abstract legal exercise. This is what happens when a routine stop spirals out of control, and the courts have to decide who is accountable. Picture a normal Tuesday. Someone is driving down the road. The stop is initiated over something minor. In this specific case, a toll violation. Not a chase, not a crime in progress, a routine stop. The kind that happens to millions of Americans every single day. The officer approaches the window. Now, in a perfect world, the driver provides their license, makes the required disclosure if the state demands it, and everyone goes home. But in the real world, things escalated. In the Barnes case, the situation turned deadly in under 2 minutes. The officer, Deputy Felix, ordered Barnes out of the car. Within seconds, the officer had jumped onto the running board of the moving vehicle, reached inside, and fired 2 shots. Here's where the legal trap comes in, and this is the part that should make every single gun owner's blood run cold. For years, police have used something called the moment of threat doctrine. Under this rule, which lower courts accepted for a generation, a judge would look only at the split second the officer pulled the trigger. They would ask one question at the exact moment the officer fired. Did he feel he was in danger? If the answer was yes, the officer was protected. It did not matter if the officer created the danger. It did not matter if the officer violated your rights 3 minutes earlier to provoke the situation. It did not matter if the officer's own reckless behavior turned a peaceful stop into chaos. The lower courts put on chronological blinders. They ignored everything that happened leading up to the confrontation. Think about how dangerous that framework is for you as a gun owner. If an officer sees your legal firearm, panics, and starts acting aggressively, jumping on your car, screaming conflicting orders, or reaching inside your vehicle, your instinctive reaction to that chaos could be used to justify whatever the officer did next. The system was designed to look at the end of the story and ignore the beginning, and it was spreading. Other courts were citing those decisions. Law enforcement agencies were building training around them until 9 Supreme Court justices said absolutely not. In a move that stunned the legal world, all 9 justices, from the most conservative to the most liberal, looked at the moment of threat doctrine and rejected it unanimously. Justice Elena Kagan, writing for a unanimous court, effectively tore up the old playbook. The Supreme Court ruled that the Fourth Amendment requires an evaluation of the totality of the circumstances. That phrase is the core of everything that changed. So, let me make sure you really hear it. The totality of the circumstances means the blindfold is off. Courts can no longer look only at the second the trigger was pulled or the handcuffs clicked on. They have to look at the entire encounter. They have to examine why the officer initiated the stop. They have to consider whether the officer's own conduct unreasonably escalated a situation that never needed to escalate. For the first time in a generation, the Supreme Court told every law enforcement agency in America, you cannot create a dangerous situation and then use that danger as a shield for ignoring the Bill of Rights. The court went further. In their written opinion, the justices made clear that treating lawful gun ownership as an automatic indicator of criminal activity is not only legally wrong, it is constitutionally backwards. The Second Amendment exists precisely to protect the right to own and carry firearms. If exercising that right automatically triggers the loss of your Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, then the government has effectively made it impossible to freely exercise one constitutional right without surrendering another. The justices called this an unacceptable constitutional trade-off. Think about that language. 9 justices who agree on almost nothing agreed that what lower courts were doing was unacceptable. That word is deliberate. That is the Supreme Court sending a signal to every judge, every prosecutor, and every law enforcement agency in the country. Your Second Amendment rights and your Fourth Amendment rights are not enemies. They coexist. And the highest court in the land just made that the law. Now, before I get into what this ruling actually means for you when you are sitting in your car with an officer walking toward your window, I need you to do one thing. If you carry, if you travel, if you ever drive through a state that is not your home state, you need this information every single time the law changes. And it changes more than most people realize. Hit subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and let us keep going. Let us get out of the courtroom and into your car. Because here's the truth about Supreme Court rulings. They are just pieces of paper until an attorney uses them in a courtroom 6 months after you have already been arrested. Your job is to stay out of that courtroom in the first place. And to do that, you need to understand exactly what this ruling does for you and exactly where it stops protecting you. The ruling is a massive shift. Before this decision, officers in many jurisdictions were trained that a firearm disclosure automatically elevated a stop and gave them expanded authority to act. This ruling says that elevation alone, the simple presence of a legal gun, is not enough to justify a search or to excuse aggressive conduct. If evidence is later found during an unconstitutional search, your attorney can argue to have that evidence suppressed, meaning it cannot be used against you in court. A search built on the wrong legal foundation is exactly the kind of thing a skilled defense attorney uses to get charges dropped or dismissed. And now you have 9 Supreme Court justices backing that argument. But here's the part that most people are not talking about. And if you do not understand it, you are going to think you have more protection than you actually do. And that false sense of security could cost you everything. There are 3 legal landmines still very much active on the ground even after this ruling. And any one of them can turn your legal carry into a felony charge before you even realize what happened. The first landmine is the automobile exception. Most people believe the Fourth Amendment protects their car the same way it protects their home. That is a dangerous misconception. In the eyes of the law, your car is mobile. Evidence can be driven away. Because of that, the courts have long recognized what is called the automobile exception. If an officer has probable cause to believe there is evidence of a crime in your vehicle, they do not need a warrant. They can search your trunk, your center console, your locked glove box right there on the side of the road. The Barnes ruling requires courts to look at the totality of the encounter. But if you give the officer probable cause in the first 30 seconds of that encounter, the rest of the ruling becomes irrelevant. The totality will include that moment you gave them what they needed, which leads directly to the second landmine. The second landmine is what defense attorneys call the furtive movement clause. This is the single most common way that legal gun owners lose their cars, their firearms. But if